Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everyone. It's Paula Edgar, host of Branding Room Only, where we talk to experts and influencers about how they built their personal brand. And today I'm super excited because we're going to be talking with Richard Bliss, who's the CEO of Bliss Point and author of Digital First Leadership. He's a master of personal and professional branding, having presented in 22 countries around. He continues to share his knowledge from the decades of leadership in marketing and in sales. Richard, welcome to the Branding Room.
Paula, thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I'm so excited to get into this. So my first question for you is, how do you define personal brand?
You know, it can go all over the place, and we hear people talk about it all the time, but often a easy way is, what do people say about you when people ask? Mm-hmm. I work with executives, and sometimes I'll ask them, okay, these previous companies, if I went back and asked them to give me one word to describe you, what would it be? Oftentimes that's your personal brand, how that comes across, how people perceive you, or how other people tell other people about you. And that's oftentimes where that brand comes from. It can involve our clothes, it can involve our work, but oftentimes it involves our attitude and our person, our identity, and how people associate that with us. So that's where I go with that.
I love that. Except I was like, one word. Oh my God. Well, let me go ahead and put this to the test. Describe yourself in 3 words or short phrases.
Probably one is generosity. Mm-hmm. I am known for, and my team thinks it's a little too much, but being generous with my knowledge, with my time, sharing, it's something. Also, I had somebody tell me, I had 2 people independently in 1 week, different parts of the country, say, Richard, you're one of the most goal-oriented people I've ever met. I was like, really? This was 2 unrelated people in the same week. I was like, nice. Okay. So goal-oriented appears to be that. And then probably, you used the term as we first got started to be blissed. Mm-hmm. And I have heard people have used that term, and it generally means, I didn't know if it was a good word or a bad word when somebody told it to me the first time. Yeah. But it generally means getting things done, actually finding ways to get things done. So those were not short descriptions, but I'm going to go with those.
Oh, listen, I'll take them. And a funny thing that my listeners and viewers know that I pick a word of the year every year. And my word of the year this year is joy. And Bliss is aligned with that.
Absolutely.
So I'll take it branding wise.
I wanted to have one of my daughters named Joyanne, because then it would be Joyanne Bliss.
Oh, but what an awesome, let's just call her that anyway. That is an awesome name.
Right?
That would be an awesome name. Well,
that would be an awesome name.
It's all good. And somebody else can steal that if their last name is Bliss. Feel free. Okay. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
I do. And it's something I developed working with leaders, but it applies to everybody, particularly now, because I deal with a lot of senior leaders. Mm-hmm. The quote I use is, your inability to master a modern communication tool calls into question your ability to lead a modern organization. Right? And so if an executive's like, well, I'm not really on social. Really? What is that? I don't know what a hashtag is. Really? Oh, I'm not really using AI. Really? The doubt that creeps into the mind of the people you're leading because you don't seem to have cared about the very things that are important to them, particularly communication. That's where that quote comes from. I created that quote when I was working with a senior leader, and he was responsible for $6 billion of annual revenue. Wow. And we were in a very small room. Mm-hmm. And he said, why in the world should I be on social media? And those words came out of my mouth. I said, your inability to master this 21st century communication tool calls into question your ability to lead this 21st century organization. Mm-hmm. And you know how somebody's eyes dilate when, we're that close. His pupils dilated. I was like, oh, I'm going to get fired right now.
Well, I mean, it is, first of all, that's definitely going to be one of our clips. But it is so true. It's when I talk to my clients about growth mindset, and their need to want to continue to iterate, and that your brand is not a static thing. That has to do in particularly with how we embrace is a big word. At least acknowledge and try to understand, right? Embrace is the next standard. I want y'all to embrace it too, but to that end, as someone who is like still working my way over to TikTok slowly, I understand, but resistance to those things, it is definitely what you're saying. Yeah. Wow, that's such a great quote. Okay. Well, do you have a hype song? And this is the song when they're going to get full Richard Bliss experience that's playing in your head. Or if you're having a terrible day and you need to not be in a terrible day, what song you're playing? And it could be the same song or a different song.
Well, the hype song that I have listened to for decades, Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine.
Oh, that's so, oh, see, that would have been, right? That.
It's a high beat, got it going, talking about that relationship. I used to think, now that I know, right? Yeah. And at my wedding, I recently got married 5 years ago, and my wedding, I sang Eric Hutchinson's, oh, now I forgot it. Eric Hutchinson's, oh, I can't remember. Now I'm going to have to go look it up. But that's one that I actually shocked my family and everything because I sang that to my wife at our wedding.
I hope you don't think I'm going to let that go. So you can sing?
No. And now, while it was charming at my wedding, my wife has grown so tired of my sing. I sing all the time. Can I sing? No. Do I sing? Absolutely. And I sing all the time. And she hates it. One, I have 5 daughters, and they grew up knowing that dad doesn't know the words to any of the songs. I'm lyric deaf. It's called lyric deaf. I'm lyric deaf. So I'll just make them up, and it drives her nuts. So no, I can't sing, but yes.
Wow. Well, yeah. First of all, I love the sort of, it's a love language, even if it's not wanted. Right? And well, if it brings you joy and you want to share it, I'm here for it.
It brings me joy. Doesn't bring her joy. But you know what's interesting is that one of my daughters at my wedding reached out to Eric Hutchison, the guy who's and he did a video recording to me and sang the song that I sang at my wedding. He sang it back to me. That my daughter reached out to him and said, my dad is getting married and your song is his theme. And it was way cool. I'm just going to tell you, it was way cool. Now I can't remember the song. I'll have to look it up.
That is so awesome, though. That is like, oh okay,
my gosh. I love that. Right.
I love that. All right. So tell me this. Where did you grow up and how did that shape your brand?
How much time do we have? Okay. We got some time. I went to 14 schools between kindergarten and the 6th grade.
Wow.
I went to 6 schools in 3 different states from September of the 6th grade to April of the 6th grade. 6 schools in 3 states. My parents were not in the military. It was not the military. And so every few weeks, we were packing up the car, my mother, my brother, and I, and I was showing up. I mean, the 6th grade, I showed up at 6 different schools as a new kid. Being a new kid in school is tough. Doing it 6 times in one school year, doing it 14 times in 6 school years, it causes you to adapt. And so there are some survival skills that kick in. 1, read a room. Right? Read a room. 2, find commonality with people as quickly as possible. Right? So that everybody wants to fit in. And I was always the new kid. I also discovered that there's no such thing as common knowledge. There's local knowledge. Because when I was a kid in Alaska, and then I'm a kid in Minnesota on a pig farm, I'm in a 1-room cabin in Alaska outside Fairbanks, Alaska, or I'm in a pig farm in Minnesota, or I'm living in a tiny little farming community near Spokane, Washington, or I'm in Western Washington, in Olympia, Washington. Wherever that might be, the local knowledge was perceived as common knowledge, but it wasn't, because people think way different where you show up.
So many questions from that. Number one, let me just I'm giving you my empathy piece because I have a 6th grader right now, and it's terrible when you're in one school, period. So 6 different schools, I can't even imagine. But the impetus around the move, was it agriculturally based? Like what was going on? I heard farm and pigs, and what was the reason for the moving?
My mother was married 5 times by the time she was 30. It was new husbands.
You know what? I had a feeling you were fascinating but here we are in the fascination. Wow.
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 Wow is right. So those were new husbands, new families, new grandparents, new siblings, new, right? Every Christmas, when people talk about Christmas traditions, I didn't have a Christmas tradition because every year I had a different family tradition, whether it was a farming community in Minnesota or whether it was a one, and then religion. Each one of those dads was a different religion as I went through and became. And so you start to discover an appreciation for diversity.
Yes. Yes.
Because you get to see how other people think and you get to see that an appreciation for how people have in common, but the differences make us so unique and interesting. So yeah, when you say, where am I from? I usually say I'm from Washington State. I was born in Washington State. My mother was born there. Where I was born and where I grew up are radically different, but I graduated high school in Olympia, Washington.
Wow. No, it's why I asked the question, where did you go for how to shape your brand? Because asking where you're from, I'm just going to answer the question, Brooklyn. That's it.
There you go.
Right. But there's so much more. But wow, I think you've probably the most robust answer in how it shaped your brand, though, because from that, even just hearing it, resilience, like the things you said, being able to read a room and to quickly find commonalities and to appreciate diversity, those are core values places that lots of adults and leaders that we know don't necessarily have. And it's sort of like foot to the fire on that in terms of having to do so. Wow, that is fascinating. Okay. Well, tell me about your career journey.
Well, how much time do we have? So my career journey, I've been in tech for a long time, as my team likes to say, since the late 1900s, which is like, what? I was like, yeah, since the late 1900s. I'm a lot older than I look.
Last century?
Last century. I started my career in the last century. I've been at tech for a very long time. And over the years, I moved around. I have remarried a couple of times, not as many times as my mother. She's on husband number 7. So
Mom's going to be on the podcast. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, mom's going. But a couple of things happened. One is I was a software executive, international software company, traveled the world. I've spoken, I think in my bio, I've spoken over 22 countries, having opportunity just to be around. And then at the pinnacle of my career as a chief marketing officer, I got fired. And they gave my job to my wife. Well, I know.
Was she your wife? Was she your wife when they gave her your job?
I knew what the next question was going to be. Yes. Yes. Talk about awkward.
How was the dinner table during that time?
but now it's ex-wife.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the next question. You didn't want to ask it. I know you didn't want to ask it, but you wanted to know.
Wow. So
I lost my job. Now, think about it. I'm traveling the world. I am the face of my industry. I'm the most well-known person around the world around my area of expertise. And all of a sudden that's been taken away. It's been given to my wife. And I am now in an awkward situation because I can't, let's suppose somebody's listening and they're in retail and they lose the job. What do? They go get another job in retail. If you're in whatever, if you're a lawyer and suddenly something happened and you go practice law somewhere else, you move. In my case, I didn't have anywhere else to go because I was the biggest vendor in my space. I was the most well-known, all my network, and 2 decades of work had been invested in my brand. And now suddenly my brand's been taken away.
Ooh.
So I have to reinvent myself. I got a little practice at that, reinventing myself.
Yes. Take it back to 6th grade.
Right? And it just kept on going. So here's what I did. I started a podcast on a topic that I felt was relevant, and it happened to be on crowdfunding and Kickstarter. Are you familiar with crowdfunding and Kickstarter?
Yep.
At the time, nobody was familiar with it. So I was the leading and only at the time podcast about Kickstarter.
Wow.
You want to guess? Now we're going to get down to one of your questions about this, but I'm going to jump ahead. You want to guess what the largest funding category is on Kickstarter?
No.
What topic? What do people put money into on Kickstarter or crowdfunding more than any other topic? By far.
terrible at quizzes. I
That's
don't know.
right.
Tell me.
Well, you're the one asking me all the questions. I'm asking back. And your audience is probably listening going, oh, probably, let's say fashion or maybe technology or something.
Okay.
Board games. Board games. Board games have generated more than $2 billion with a B on Kickstarter alone.
I would never have guessed that.
Nope. So I happen to be well known in the board game industry. So I started a podcast teaching board game designers how to use crowdfunding to raise money. The podcast was called Funding the Dream. It's still out there. It ran for 350 episodes.
Wow. We'll definitely link that.
Okay.
Wow.
I also wrote a book, but it's not the book that you mentioned. I wrote a book, self-published, self-edited. That's not a good idea. There are spelling errors on the back cover of that book. That is not a good idea. But I wrote a book, started a podcast, started teaching myself social media, found a way, generated 25,000 followers on 2 different Twitter accounts, taught myself LinkedIn, learned from people.
Yeah.
And here's what happened. I got a phone call from somebody who said, hey, I'm at this massive tech company and they're looking for someone to come in and help write, basically ghost write for a senior executive on Forbes. But this individual needs to be able to write, understands technology, works with executives, lives in Silicon Valley, is available immediately, and is willing to do it for $800 a month. Are you interested?
That's a lot of to beat.
That's a really, really specific requirement.
That's a narrow part, yes.
Are you interested? $800 a month. And I said, yes. Now, remember I lost my job to—
I was going to say, had you got the job back yet?
No. And she wasn't happy because this wasn't, hey, she'd married a vice president that was traveling the world and the expense accounts and $800 a month. I think that was probably the final straw that led to this. But
she had the expense accounts now.
Yeah. It didn't work out. Anyway.
Okay.
She might be listening. We're not going to mention her name. She might. We better hope that, anyway.
Hey, girl.
So here's what happened.
Yes.
I said yes and stepped in because the individual, he's from New York. The individual executive's from New York. He owns a home in that faces Central Park, off of Central Park West, up on the west side. His name is on the side of the building at the business school at the University of Notre Dame. It's called the Mendoza College of Business.
Oh, I know who it is.
His name's Tom Mendoza. And I got to go and work directly with Tom and help work with him as he wanted to put his stories out on Forbes. And then I taught him social media and I taught him, and then the salespeople wanted to learn it. And then the CEO wanted to learn it. And all of a sudden I got hired as an employee. I was making more than $800 a month at that point.
Good.
And all of a sudden that step, that risk I took of reinventing myself, even though I didn't know where it was going, my instinct said it's going to go somewhere good. And when that $800 offer came up, it was the money wasn't the opportunity. The opportunity was a door open to a world that I normally would have never had access to. And this was how long ago? This is more than a decade ago. And from that, a series of events happened that allowed me 5-6 years ago to go out on my own, start a business, working with these same executives, with sales teams, with these companies, helping them understand how to make these transitions, how to become successful, how to build your brand, how to use LinkedIn, how to become influential in a digital world, because I had done that path and now I was just going to show people how I'd done it. So that's a very, very long answer to how I got here with this career.
That is, I'm so happy you said the whole answer because number one, folks, what I pulled from that is that you have to constantly like I was saying, iterate in your terms of your brand, but that was a full brand like a whole right
reset.
And I think, people ask the question all the time, like if I've had a ding to my brand, what should I do, Paula? And I'm like, this is not a ding. This is like, my brand, come on into this next room. That brand is no longer yours. And I immediately felt like a wrench in my chest, like that hurt. It felt like scary to me. And so for you to talk about it, obviously from the other side, I'm sure that was challenging for you to even think of yourself differently than how you had thought of yourself for such a long time, building up this influence and being the man about town in this space, and then having to figure it out again. And so I'm in awe.
Well, I appreciate that. And then, and in the middle of this, then I got the shocking news that she wanted a divorce, right? It came out of the blue. So not only was I trying to reinvent myself, but suddenly now I was in the middle of, and so your listeners are probably a relationship breakup. So there's all kinds of identity and brand things going on here. There's a personal identity. There's professional identity. There's, am I worthy? Am I
spiritual value? All the identities are lined up, and yeah, wow.
It was across the board. And so, yeah. So there you go. Without going into any terrible details, that gives you an idea of kind of, what I went through. And so I find myself today, could I even anticipate that I would have been here? No, because I couldn't have anticipated what I went through to get here. And that's what we have to think about, is that when we're faced with a challenge, a setback, we have to rethink, this is an opportunity. Now, I need to set aside my emotion or hang on, process my emotion.
Yeah.
Go through it, maturity, deal with it, and then figure out, okay, I can't just lay here and wallow. What's the next step? What do I need to do? And sometimes it's the tiniest step. Sometimes it's an $800 a month job, simply because you believe that it'll take you somewhere that you never anticipated.
Taking a chance. I, as a fellow business owner, I have my own business. I all the time tell people the easiest decision that I ever made was to bet on myself. Because I, for the most part, can control my output, my response, et cetera. And while I can't control the market, I can control some things. And having a boss did not allow that. So wow.
Absolutely.
That was fascinating. All right. So you talked about, doing this globally, 22 countries, particularly in the sales space. How has being in all those different places with all these different types of people help to think about how you approach selling the personal brand aspect to executives? How do you say to them, this is important for you to have, and then get them on board to start doing it?
One is going back to those survival skills, finding and recognizing where they're at. Not where I am, but where are they? Is there a comfort level? What's holding them back? What are they struggling with? Recognizing and understanding that. One of the biggest challenges that goes on today with executives and the teams that support them is oftentimes the disconnect between, for example, a young woman gets a new job as a social media manager of a large company. Okay. And I'm picking young women because oftentimes it is young women who step into that role.
Okay.
And so this young woman now is being asked to create a piece of content, social media content, for a 50-plus-year-old, and I'm going to be a white male.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So now this young woman has no experience or ability to speak in the voice of him. And he doesn't have the ability to understand how to ask questions to get the answers he needs. And so, for example, this young woman has no idea why he doesn't know what a hashtag is. Right? She's like, he doesn't what? Which means if she doesn't know why he doesn't know what a hashtag is, he doesn't know how to ask what it is so that he can get an answer. And this I'm using two very stark demographics to draw this experience. I recently spoke at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, and the room was full of 300 people who are learning, wanting to be at their social media jobs. Well, they were predominantly young women, and oftentimes now young women of color. And yet I know the executives they're supporting, I know those guys. And most of the time they're guys, and most of the time we know they're white. That disconnect becomes incredibly important for a young millennial to understand how to talk to an older. Boomers have kind of made their way out of the market mostly. So how do I talk to this Gen Xer leader? And the Gen Xer leader's like, how do I talk to a Gen Z person? And so in my role, I help these two groups And now we can get away from the stereotypes, because now I'm working with women executives. I'm working with leaders of all kinds of backgrounds, and they're getting younger and younger and younger, and they are more and more diverse. And this means that you need to be aware of cultural differences. I'm in tech. There's a lot of tech leaders who are coming out of India. And Indian culture, when it comes to self-promotion and how you present yourself, is radically different than white, what's it called? WASP, right? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That approach and India. So these two are going to have very different styles of self-promotion, of self-identity. So you've got to be aware of that. I've had the opportunity of living in foreign countries. I speak fluent Spanish. I have lived in Asia. I speak a limited amount of Chinese, Mandarin. This has allowed me to think differently, not just from a generational standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. But Paula, I have blind spots, and my team is made up of young women who have helped me say, look, Richard, you've got a blind spot here. And they're candid enough with me that I've needed to listen and make sure, because I'm aware I have blind spots. I just don't know what they are. And this comes from that understanding that there's stuff I don't know. I don't know common knowledge.
Right.
And so this is a key thing for executives to become comfortable understanding how to step into an environment they don't know, and how to teach a different generation of social natives how to communicate with executives to help them understand what they don't know. And those two groups, oftentimes, there's all kinds of diversity. I've covered a lot there with that conversation, but
no, it's fascinating and totally in line with what I've talked about on the podcast and what I do. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, my podcast, well, I guess depending on when this comes out, but previously my podcast, I had an author and speaker named Chris DeSantis, who's written a book about the generations of the workplace and how and it's called like, why do you irritate me? And so we talked about a lot of that. And in the work that I do, professional development through the lens of DEI, I talk about cultural fluency all the time. People want to be culturally competent. I'm like, that's a standard you can never meet, because to your point, local knowledge is not common knowledge. And sometimes when we are living in our biases and our privileges, we think our knowledge should dominate other knowledge. And so understanding that you want to try to be fluent and to hear other people's experiences and needs, et cetera. I talk to leaders about inclusive leadership and inclusive communication and those types of things. And so this is all very much in line. And most importantly in all that is that when you do it, and even if you do it and make a mistake, you are regarded in your brand much better than if you are resistant and decide this is who I am and this is how it's going to be. Like, that is, to your point at the beginning, that's a non-starter. People won't trust you because the world is changing, swirling around. You're standing still. So I love that.
I use a little comment when people, I got asked, I was doing a presentation shortly before our interview here. And I was asked about emojis in social media and LinkedIn, emojis.
Yes.
I knew where the question was coming from. So I said, look, I tried using emojis. I love chocolate ice cream. So I used that pile of chocolate ice cream with the big googly eyes and the big smile. And then my team pointed out that wasn't chocolate ice cream. Now, whenever I say that, technically that's a joke. But you know what makes it funny? That there are people in the audience who think it might be true.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm of that generation. He probably, is that true? I mean, it could be, right? He might not have known that was, anyway. Being in tune and being able to, first of all, recognize, I don't think I know the answer to that one. And for a lot of executives, they struggle with that because they don't know how to ask the question. Yeah. And as I pointed out, the younger generation doesn't know why the question's being asked. What's a hashtag? What do you mean? How do you explain to somebody what a hashtag is who has no concept other than if they're old enough to say, you remember when you had the little round, there was a button there that had a little.
It's a pound sign.
It's a pound sign.
Hilariously, my daughter was like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. We actually had a similar conversation. And I was like, you know what, forget you. Anyway, so, okay. Right. Speaking of kind of getting into new technology, et cetera, with the rise of digital tools, what do you think are the key elements that executives and everyday folks should focus on today to enhance their personal brands online?
Okay, so we've had a great conversation here this last 30 minutes about adaptability, about rebranding, about teaching yourself. Okay, we know the answer to this one right now because the people listening to this podcast are being exposed to something that and we're not talking about generation, all of us, anybody who's listening to your podcast, no matter their age, their background, culture, race, it does not matter. We are all being exposed to something that is so radically transformational. It has never happened before to human beings on this planet. And that is generative AI is changing everything. Now, we've heard this before. The internet changed everything. Well, I remember when they said that, right? Google changed everything. Whatever. TikTok changed everything.
Yes.
No.
This is it.
This is it. Everything is being changed, and is being changed so fast that in the past, we had time as a society to create social contracts that allowed us to deal with it. So let's talk about the digital divide when it came to access to the internet. You and I both know that there was a gap that got bigger and bigger as those who had access to high-speed bandwidth and those who didn't.
Right.
And oftentimes it was economics, it was geography.
Yeah.
And as that gap got wider, those who had got better. But we had a social contract to say, okay, let's put in place things to make it possible for bandwidth, laptops, iPads, whatever. Let's adjust to that. Well, that happened over a series of years.
Yeah.
Generative AI, the way we recognize and understand it, has been out for 18 months. 18 months. And in those 18 months, it is possible that right now you or I could be a fake avatar. That this could be a deep fake interview, that you actually could be talking to my avatar and not to me. That is possible right now.
Wow.
18 months ago, that wasn't even conceived of. That was in a sci-fi movie that Steven Spielberg put together. I mean, it was like, here we are 18 months later, which means that each of us have to ask ourselves the question, and you've already said it, am I going to resist it or am I going to lean into it? And that means even overcoming the fear. There's several fears here. There's one of, I don't know, I don't want to look stupid, so I'm not going to do it at all, and I'm going to resist it. There is, oh my gosh, if I do it, they're going to know everything about me and steal all my money out of my bank account. Right? It's like, oh no, they're going to learn who I am, and now they're going to make fake phone calls to my kids, and strangers are going to pick them up, and
Yep.
We've heard it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's all happened in a matter of months or days. We have not had time as a society to create a social contract of how we're going to deal with this. And so my answer to your question is that right now we all need to lean in. We all need to learn and share and be comfortable, so that my mother is going to be 80 next year. And she's very, well, obviously she's got some activity that she goes on with her life, but she's also studied computer science in the 60s and has been at the forefront. And I started hearing her talk about this resistance to AI. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, blah, blah. And then I realized she lived, okay, hopefully she's not listening to this, but she lives in an all-white, over 60 retirement community. And they're all sitting around talking about how rapists are crossing the Mexican border and how AI is going to come in and steal all their money.
So she's in Florida?
Arizona.
Good guess. But anyway.
you had two guesses, right? It was one or the other.
Yep. So yes, that resistance is there. But I mean.
But here's what I said to her.
Yeah.
I said, look, you are the smartest person I've ever met in your generation when it came to technology. Since I was a kid, you have been leading the way. I urge you right now to become the smartest person in your collective generation that you hang out with about understanding what AI is. This was my text because I was fed up with the whole phone calls of, oh, it's going to steal. You know what her response was? Teach me.
Okay. And
I'm gonna wave the flag of victory and march off the field of battle. That was a win. My point here is that my mother was willing to, even at the age of 80, lean in and say, okay, all right, I'll not listen to them. I'll listen to somebody who I respect, her son. So to your audience, you don't have to become an expert.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to use it. But generative AI, more than anything, figure out ChatGPT. Go out and play around with Midjourney. Just play. That's why, to come back, circle to my message, in my career, when I had to reinvent myself, I went and played. I went on Kickstarter, crowdfunding, and talked about board games. That has nothing to do with my career. I played. So find ways to play in a safe environment and just play. For example, I'm going to recommend, Paula, what's your favorite author?
Toni Morrison.
What? Okay.
Toni Morrison is my favorite author. Yes.
And what does Toni write? What kind of genre?
So a lot of fiction based on the African American experience. Beloved is one of my favorite books that she wrote that's been turned into movies. So a lot about the African American experience.
Okay. So here's what you're going to do. Here's what your audience is going to do using this as an example. Okay. You're going to go out to ChatGPT.
Oh gosh.
And you're going to say a prompt that says, I'd like you to write me the opening chapter of a book in the style of, and what was the author?
Toni Morrison.
Toni Morrison. Here are the two main characters. A 30-year-old single mom living in Iowa. And his genre, is there like mystery? Or is it just life?
It's just life. It's just life.
Okay. Who has this moral dilemma. And suddenly, because of an aging parent in Virginia, has to quit her job and find a way to move her and her daughter to Virginia. And I want on the way for her to encounter an individual who transforms her life in this experience that she never would have anticipated. Could you write me the opening chapter in the style of Toni around these two topics? Here are the characters. Go. Now, it's going to spit out this. It's going to spit this out.
Yeah.
It's going to identify it, give it the dilemma, show it, introduce this character, do all of this. And then you're like, okay, you're going to read this and you're like, okay, now here's what I want to happen. I want this individual to suddenly be not real, and that it's actually her imagination because she was driving late at night and she stopped at a rest stop, and this gentleman, maybe it was the gentleman, he came up to her, and now she's realizing that she has a spiritual guide who's been talking to her. And then she finds out later that it's actually her great-grandfather who lived in this, right? So now we're going to go down. And it's going to keep writing this for you. And you're telling the story. And now, okay, Paula, are you sucked in at this moment?
I mean, first of all, you had me at writing the voice up, and I know that it does that. And I have to tell you, it's probably my lawyerness that I'm like, but it's theirs. But it's her voice. I'm literally like, but it's her voice. And I get it, because that's where pretty much all of the talk around AI and owning and copyright and all of those things are happening right now. Yep. And so my readers, who are primarily lawyers or lawyer adjacent, are literally probably like, girl, this is what we've been talking about.
This is what we've been talking about.
But it is the way I've described AI is a faster brain. So that we have it, but we got to work to get the stuff out. They take all the things that we have, all of our brains, and then go, let's do this faster. And that is
they connect dots. Yeah. Now, part of my brand is I have the ability, some people think it's just crazy, to connect dots, but it's because I see something that's happening in Fairbanks, Alaska. I see something that's happening in Minneapolis. I see something that's happening in Spokane. And all of a sudden I recognize, wait, there's some things that people aren't seeing that maybe they think is unique. Or I see a bunch of board gamers who don't know how to raise money, and all of a sudden there's this crowdfunding thing, and I connect the dots. What AI does more than anything that we've ever been able to do is take all of the dots, and then we're like, tell us something. Or for example, tell us something that's not there. Here's a website of my competitor. Please analyze the website of my competitor and tell me what's not there and how I would build a marketing campaign to exploit the lack of content they have there so that I can differentiate my brand to take advantage of that.
Oh, what a prompt. Y'all, you better write that down.
Right?
That is a prompt. Wow.
Write me something. Tell me what's not there. Well, whenever we had somebody tell us what's not in the law,
right.
Not just tell me what's in the law, but what's not in the law. Mm-hmm. And here AI can jump in and say, well, here's your case. This isn't there, and this isn't there. So you could take advantage of it by this, and this. You're like, whoa, right? I mean, connecting the dots.
So whoa. It's so, and I think that is why folks are hesitant, right? People are like, whoa, it's like back in the day when we watched, Terminator and whatever that movie was with that one guy who ended up being a robot that's not the Terminator. And then, right, all of those things, it was like forecasting that people would be able to read our eyes and do all these things. But what I have read about and explained to people is that we have had access to and been benefiting from AI for a long time. We just haven't had direct consumer access to AI. So now, yes, now all the things are happening. Now you can take a song lyric and be like, write me this rap like I'm Snoop Dogg, and it will. And I do think there's a lot of conversation that's going to continue to happen about how those folks will be able to benefit from people tapping into their talent or their lens of their talent, and also people be able to curate and create in a different and better way because they have access to all of these things. I'm excited to see where it's going to go, what I really want to talk to you about is what's coming up next. And so I'm going to take this because this tool that we both love has just started using AI pretty adeptly, and that is LinkedIn. So y'all, when I first was introduced to Richard, it was in a webinar where he was talking about using LinkedIn. And I was like, I'll just sit through this. I know everything about LinkedIn already. And then 3 seconds in, I was like, wait, he's teaching me. and like I said to him, I knew that I needed to make sure that this conversation and you talking about this tool, because I say LinkedIn is the most powerful personal branding tool that we have at our fingertips. Hard stop.
Yep.
And most people don't know how to leverage it. So you are a fancy dancy LinkedIn influencer top voice. So tell me, what do the people need to know about LinkedIn? What would you give?
I completely forgot that's what we were going to talk about. We got so excited talking about other things.
I told you, this is what we do. Like, I mean, trust me, I don't feel bad about the conversation. We're good.
I'm going to agree with your statement because your listeners, every single one of your listeners, guaranteed 100% have a LinkedIn account. 100, right? Guaranteed.
Yeah.
That is not true for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or Twitter. Not all of them have those.
Right.
Every single one of us have a LinkedIn account because it has become the platform of trust. Mm-hmm. When I look at your profile, which I'm looking at right now, I trust that's you. I see you. I recognize you. I see your content. All of these things tell me that I can trust this. You've got the certification badge. Mm-hmm. So the way we use LinkedIn originally was to find a job or to connect, Rolodex, right? Electronic Rolodex, although the younger generation, I keep having to spell it for them. So this idea that we're going to connect with each other, that's what LinkedIn is. So why should I be on LinkedIn? And I already had that quote, because if you can't master this tool, why in the world are you leading this organization? So here's some things that I dropped some truth bombs on you that shocked you that I can share with your audience.
Please.
LinkedIn is fundamentally different than all of the other social media platforms. We call it the upside down world, of social media, if we're a Stranger Things fan. Because everything you do on LinkedIn, everything you do on the other social media platforms will sabotage your efforts to be successful on LinkedIn. Anything that you do to be viral on the other platforms will kill you, and not in a good way, on LinkedIn. So here we go. LinkedIn's goal, the reason is because the other platforms make money off of advertising. We are the product. Advertisers are the customer. We create content. We cause other people to see it. That drives revenue. We all understand that. That's not how it works on LinkedIn. LinkedIn only has 20% of their revenue coming from advertising. The other 80% comes from subscribers. People paying for LinkedIn Premium, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Recruiter. Some of my clients spend more than $1 million a year on LinkedIn Sales Navigator alone.
Wow.
Not for advertising, but for the tools that give access to the platform to do better and better things. Wow. This means the algorithm is radically different in its outcome. It's what LinkedIn's trying to do is establish communication and conversations between its members, not your content to go viral, not to entertain, not to distract, or as I say, not to hold you underwater until you stop struggling. Facebook. Okay, so what we got here is they do it in an incredibly counterintuitive way.
Mm-hmm.
When you put out a piece of content on LinkedIn, now you have 16,000 followers. LinkedIn does not show your content to 16,000 people.
They need
you know this. Your audience is going to be a little surprised. It shows it to less than 10%. So I go with the 10% because it's easier. So 1,600 people on average are going to see your content.
Mm-hmm.
But if you included a link in your post, LinkedIn cuts that audience in half. Bam. If it's a link to a YouTube video, 80% reduction in your audience. Because LinkedIn wants you to have a conversation, not be a source to drive people somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they only allow you to have one conversation a day. If you post more.
It's wild. Everybody hold, please. Go. Hey, now that you go.
If you post more often than once a day,
mm-hmm.
LinkedIn hides the subsequent post from nearly 95 to 98% of your audience. Now, a couple of days ago, you posted, I think, 2 things in the same day.
I know.
And you probably saw a radical difference in the numbers,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because LinkedIn's like, whoa, no, we're testing that first conversation. You can't have 2 conversations at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the one conversation, and now you'll let it run for about 24 hours. And if it's running really well, let it run for 48 hours before you another post. Because if you post again, LinkedIn's like, all right, stop that conversation. Let's start a new one. You're like, whoa, that one was really good. They're like, no, you get about one conversation. Now, this is radically different than Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. More is Gary Vaynerchuk, that many people know. He's like 100 pieces of content a day. No, LinkedIn's like, that is not our business model. One piece of content a day. Now, one post.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's some more bad news. Okay. The link cuts your audience in half. A multiple posts a day cuts your audience by 99%.
Mm.
In addition, if you hit the repost button, LinkedIn shares that repost with 1% of your audience. So that would be for you, 160 people. If you saw a post from me and hit repost, 160 people of your 16,000 would see it.
Why, LinkedIn?
Why? Because we're like, wait, I want everybody to see it.
Exactly. They deserve to see my content.
Right. So now let's suppose that was true. So let's suppose you made a post and everybody went and reshared it.
Mm-hmm.
And it went to everybody's contacts who reshared it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I made a post and everybody reshared it.
Mm-hmm.
And then your friend made a post and everybody reshared it. What would our feed look like?
Yeah, it
would just be filled with, now somebody might say, well, my feed's already filled with a bunch of people reposting. Well, that's because you have been telling the algorithm you want to see that content by liking, commenting, or engaging with their content. So the algorithm's like, all right, you're part of that 10%. We're going to keep shoving content at you. Mm-hmm. Even if all you're doing is what I call liking. A like on LinkedIn is an indicator I did not find your content interesting. I liked it. What? No, a like means I found it interesting. No, it means you did not find it interesting enough to stop and participate in the conversation.
Mm.
You drove by.
What if I love it? Does it matter if I choose another emoji?
Because LinkedIn's like, no, we're here not to entertain. We're here to drive conversation. Mm-hmm. And if you were sitting around at a dinner table and you were talking and everybody at the table kept going like this. You're like, yeah, does anybody have anything to say? Yeah. Good job. Way to go. Congrats. You're like, you're just talking to yourself. So LinkedIn's like, that is not valuable at all.
Mm.
So instead, what happens when your post goes live, LinkedIn starts tracking it immediately and determining there's a value associated with every interaction, the like being the least valuable interaction. Mm-hmm. But if somebody reposts it, I just said it's not going to do any good for them, it will give them 10 points of value to your post, unless they leave a comment with the thought. You know how it's repost with your comments?
Yeah.
Then it's only 3 points of value, and LinkedIn hides it from 99.9% of your audience, and it counts as your one post for the day.
That was shocking. That I was jaw open on the floor. I thought, of course you want me to say things and then my people to see it. And I was like, wait, you see my people aren't seeing it.
That's right. Nobody's seeing it. Instead, what we need to realize is that on LinkedIn, comments are picked up and shown to our audience, which means if you want to reshare and then leave a comment, leave the comment on the original conversation. Don't try to split the conversation, because what people don't realize, and I'm watching our time to make sure that we stay in time, but what people don't realize on LinkedIn is that 100% of your comments are pushed to your network. 100% of your comments. And so this is something for us to be aware of. So if, just for fun, I'm going to look at your last few comments.
Now let's.
Amanda, I will. Let's see your next comment.
She was asking about
I love to play dress up. Hang on, let me look at your next comment. Can't wait to see you. Okay.
Those are all true.
It's all true. But we're trained by social media to talk to the person who wrote the post, to talk to the author. We forget, or it's never dawned on us. Every comment is being overheard by our audience, by our network. So let's come back to brand. LinkedIn, to build your brand, is not about creating content on their platform.
Okay.
That is not the secret to building your brand on LinkedIn. The secret to building your brand on LinkedIn is participating in conversations where you add value, because your audience and your audience's audience will hear and see your comments as you participate in a conversation. Right now, you and I are having a conversation back and forth.
Yes.
If all they heard was your side of it and then a bunch of thumbs up from me, there's no value. But because we're going back and forth, so as you're talking to the individual, realize, just like this podcast, people are listening. And LinkedIn wants to build your brand. So they're going to take every comment you make, 100%, and push it to a portion of your network. This means if you want to build your brand, you need to be commenting at least 3 to 5 times a day.
Wow.
And those comments need to add value. They can't be congrats, well done, I love you.
I feel like you're pointing at me when you say,
can't wait to see you.
You go, girl.
Right, you go, girl. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right. The challenge here is that sometimes that is the appropriate comment. But if we really want to build our brand, what we're going to do is we're going to go find people who we want to be associated with. We're going to find their content and we're going to add value to the conversation. Nobody posts content on LinkedIn hoping nobody sees it.
True.
So if you post something on LinkedIn, or somebody posts something, let's see, I'm going to look at your last post.
Okay.
Your last post on LinkedIn was about, don't say I didn't warn you. Today is the last day to purchase your tickets to the Metropolitan Black Bar Association's 40th Anniversary Awards Gala. This was 4 days ago. Ticket sales end at midnight. Now, okay. And then you've got a nice little image there, and you got 16 comments on that. And you know what you did? I know what you did. Is you responded to, some of those are yours, but you responded to these. There's a conversation happening. So every time that Trish commented on your post, that post and her comment got put in front of her audience. So more than clicking the reshare button, leaving a comment is the best and fast way, one, to promote somebody else's content, but also to associate, because you responded to Trish, which means Trish's comment and your comment gotten put in front of your audience. So Trish didn't just talk to you. Trish talked to a huge portion of your 16,000 followers. So what Trish would want to do is like, okay, if I'm going to leave a comment and I know that a huge portion of 16,000 people are going to read it, what do I want to say? Not just what do I want to say to Paula, but what do I want to say? Because oftentimes we forget. We think it's just a personal conversation happening between the two of us. Yeah, that is if it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, it's semi-personal, right? It's But on LinkedIn, it's actively being pushed. So this is how you transform the way you think about LinkedIn, commenting. So here's my advice to your audience.
Please go.
I promise. If they go and leave 3 comments a day, on 3 different individuals, first degree connections, colleagues, but people they want to be known for, people in their industry, in the law profession, people maybe who are outside if they're solopreneurs. If you do 3 comments a day, that's all you need to do. And you do it for 5 days in a row. I guarantee the number of people who look at their LinkedIn profile, the number of people who look at your profile will jump by 300 to 500% in that same week. You want people to pay attention to you? Go comment. And not just attaboy, great job, but comment and add truly the value you want to be known for, the brand you want to build. And LinkedIn will reward you and start putting you and your profile in front of a whole lot of people.
This, everybody, is what I want. This is when I was like, oh, he has to be on the podcast because okay. So I already knew. So number one, before we even come to my closing questions, because of course we have to close now, you got to come back.
And this time we'll come back and actually talk about LinkedIn.
We're gonna do a part 2, y'all, and yeah, we're gonna talk about how to be blissful on LinkedIn. That's gonna be the next one. Fascinating. I really am sitting here like, oh my gosh. First of all, I hope all of you take the challenge and do it, and then send the message and tell us how it worked out for you, because I want to know. I asked everybody on my podcast 2 questions, and so one is, stand by your brand. It's essentially, what aspect of your personal brand will you never compromise on?
I truly believe that we are all in this together. And I really want people to know what I have to share. And so very seldom you'll never find me hawking something. I don't believe in affiliate links. I don't believe, look, if I'm going to tell you about it, it's because I believe in it. And that's an aspect of, so some would consider me an influencer with 120,000 followers on LinkedIn, 25 to 50,000 followers on Twitter. No, I don't use that for any kind of am I making sense?
Yeah. Yes.
That relationship I have with my audience is sacred to me. And I will not jeopardize that relationship simply to make a buck.
That definitely resonates. Like on my website, I have a list of people who I refer about, certain things for people. They ask me about coaching, et cetera, all the time. And I have it on there. And it's either I know personally or someone who I trust has told me. And that's how you get on there, because I care and I want people to. So I get it. I think that leads back to your being giving, like you said at the beginning, that you give a lot, and that's giving in spirit and giving in time, talent, and treasure. And that always comes back. Okay. So Branding Room Only, my podcast, is a play on standing room only because I'm clever. And as such, I ask people, what is the aspect about you that people would be only standing room in a room to experience, observe, et cetera, about Richard Bliss?
I was presenting to a group of IT professionals in Denmark, several years ago. And after the presentation, I got feedback. And it was the best feedback, and this has been many years ago, is the best feedback that I've ever received. Because I was talking about SMTP gateways and how IP addresses and all. It was a very technical, deep technical presentation. The individual who I was told that this Scandinavians are all like stoic and they're not going to, he walked up to the organizer and said, I would pay money to listen to that man speak. That, because at the time I was there as a guest, and I got to tell you, the magic is that when I share my background, to take it all the way back, I have seen what it means to not know something. I have seen what it means to want to understand and not know how or who to ask. And the magic that I have, and you've probably witnessed it here, is I have the ability to see inside of you and anticipate the very things that you don't know, but wish you did know, and don't know how to get access to that. I have felt it my whole life growing up, of being on the outside and not knowing. Now that I get to be on the inside on things, my magic is being able to help people understand what it is and what they can do to take that very, very next step and make it so easy and accessible. So I would say that is the magic that I bring.
Wow. What a perfect, that was awesome. Okay. Richard, it's been wonderful to have you on my podcast, being in the branding room. How can folks connect with you and learn more about you and how you add value to the world?
They can follow me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tend to connect with everybody, but you can still follow me. Mm-hmm. You can email me, rbliss, letter R, BLISS, at Bliss Corp. Mm-hmm. That's CORP, blisscorp.com. They can email me. Mm-hmm. And if they want to have a conversation, my EA can put that in touch. But those are the two main ways for them to kind of find me, track me, and keep on top of that.
Fantastic. Everybody, if you decide to reach out to Richard, make sure you told him you heard about him on the podcast.
Absolutely.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for being in the brand room. And I'm holding you to it. You got to come back.
We got to come back and talk about board games. That's what we got to talk about.
Yeah, talk about so many things.
Right.
All right. It's been wonderful. Everybody tell a friend. Make sure they don't make them, they comment on every post this. We'll talk soon. See you again next time in the branding room.